Hey guys, it's reading day, and I'm going to be reading from the Book of Werewolves, a book written in the 1800s. We'll be right back. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Happy afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody's had a great day. I know I have. I'm on a little earlier today. For you guys here in the United States, you probably know why. Starting from 6 to 7 p.m. today, or 7:30 p.m. rather, I don't know, there's going to be a presidential debate. And I know what's going to happen. Usually we air at 6:30 p.m. Pacific, and I know what's going to happen. No one's going to watch anyway, because they'll be busy watching the debate. So I thought it would be a lot easier to go live early, to do the live show early. Because I'd like to watch that debate too. Okay, my name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of Sacramento. We are 45 strong up and down the state, which means if you have a paranormal need, we can help you. It may take us a couple days to get to you. Why? Because California is such a big state. It's hard to imagine how big California really is until you're actually here. Okay, I mean, there's huge areas, huge wide open areas. In the case that we can't get out there right away to help you, we do have psychics on staff who can call you and do a remote read, and if what's going on is paranormal, in most cases they can calm down the energy, okay? And then we'll just get out there. It won't take us more than 2 or 3 days. And I'm available by email and phone, so it's a win-win. Anyway, if you're watching from Facebook today, and a lot of you are, but you haven't done so already, please feel free to hit that follow button. Always looking for followers. That's what this is about, sharing and following, right? Also, if you want to come in the chat room today, feel free to chat amongst yourselves. I should be able to read them too as I'm going, because I will not be on TikTok today, so I won't be distracted. So please do that, and please leave us a thumbs up, happy face, a like, because what that does is that puts us up in what they call the FYP in Facebook, which is the For You page, which is where all the suggestions come from. Like when you get on your Facebook page and you see suggestions of people that you might want to be friends with or something or meet, that's what that's about, and puts us out there to do that. The same thing with YouTube, but over YouTube, which is youtube.com/California Haunts Radio, I have more than 1,000 videos sitting over there, all of this show, all different topics. I am a journalist, photojournalist in my real life, and I don't like to stay on the same types of topic. For instance, we have a woman coming up on the show in July who had one of the first convictions of a murderer without having evidence like a body, this lawyer. So I do things like that. Plus, there's so many shows over there that I do have folders setting up with under different topics, like cryptids. If you're the medium Nancy Matt, she's over there too. You just click on that and just pick the show you want. So I'm trying to make it easier for everybody. And again, you want to click that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And again, and thumbs up and all that good stuff. Show me some love and chat amongst yourselves in the chat room. And again, that works with the FYP. We're also on Twitch today. Works the same way. Like I said a few minutes ago, I'm not on TikTok because TikTok, I did that on Sunday with the air conditioner on with the headset, and people could barely hear me over there. So I've decided to not do that today, and it is going to be around 95 today, and we're right at the height right now. So there's no way in heck I'm going to turn my AC off to do the show. So, sorry TikTok. Okay, well, we are in the middle, well, we're not even in the middle. We're coming down towards the end of this book about werewolves, and it's been a really, really, really cool book. We normally read on Sunday, but I decided to read today. Give us a little relaxing bit. If you're listening, and I know Pamela, who is a regular, she'll clean the house and carry me in her pocket, which is cool. I get to go for a walk, right? Or wherever that, I might be in the car traveling with you, I don't know, especially with the RSS feed. But anyway, just it's a whole thing to relax. Sit down and start your evening, because for a lot of you, you're just getting home from work, the evenings are starting. Sit down, start your evening, relax, have a cold drink, warm drink, whatever it is you drink. have a sandwich, like it says, your snacks, right? So I'm going to read for about an hour, and I may finish the book tonight. I'm not sure how far I have to go. These chapters are in Roman numerals. I'm not good with Roman numerals. I'm not good with foreign languages either, as you guys found out with this book. But I'm going to go ahead and read this, and we might finish earlier tonight too, depending on if the book ends. So we'll see. I don't know how close I am on this, but join me. And it's been a really neat book. This book was written by a priest, an Anglican priest, and the gentleman knows his stuff. He did his research, the medical research, everything. I mean, so far we've talked about mental things that can happen to people, to make them think they're werewolves and things like that. So it has been a very interesting read. And if you haven't heard the rest of the chapters, go on back and go to YouTube and go back and listen from the first day, because there's some really, really, really interesting stories and stuff that he has in there, and interesting research. All right, it's 4:35 p.m. Pacific now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read for about an hour, and maybe we'll see. We'll see if we don't finish the book today. But I'm going to read for at least an hour today of this book, and I hope you enjoy it. It's a fascinating, like I said, it's a fascinating read, and I've learned so much out of this book, and I'm so glad I found it. I can honestly say. And I need you to remember something, okay? The books that I read are out of copyright. So they're in the public domain, okay? And in order to be that way, they have to be written like back in the 1600s all the way up to 1944. So some of the terminology in this book, this one was written in the mid-1800s, may not be, with our culture today. So I will try to work around that as I'm reading, as much as I can, okay? Because a lot of the stuff, somebody might find offensive because that's how they were back in the 1800s. So just bear with me on that, and I'll do my best to try to get around that and work with it, okay? So we're at chapter XV. You guys are going to have to give me a list of Roman numerals, because I have no clue. Chapter XV is called the anomalous case of the human hyena. It is well known that Asian romance is full of stories of violators of graves. Eastern superstition attributes to certain individuals a passion for unearthing corpses and mangling them. Of a moonlit night, weird forms are seen stealing among the tombs and burrowing into them with their long nails, desiring to reach the bodies of the dead ere the first streak of dawn compels them to retire. These ghouls, as they are called, are supposed generally to require the flesh of the dead for incantations or magical compositions. But very often they are actuated by the sole desire of rending the sleeping corpse and disturbing its repose. There is every probability that these ghouls were no mere creations of the imagination, but were actual resurrectionists. Human fat and the hair of a corpse which is grown in the grave form ingredients in many a necromantic receipt. And the witches who compound these diabolical mixtures would unearth corpses in order to obtain the requisite ingredients. It was the same in the Middle Ages, and to such an extent did the fear of ghouls extend, that it was common in Brittany for churchyards to be provided with lamps, kept burning during the night, so that witches might be deterred from venturing under cover of darkness to open the graves. Fernari gives the following history of a ghoul in his History of Sorcerers. In the beginning of the 15th century, there lived at Baghdad, let me go ahead and I want to enlarge a little bit more. In the beginning of the 15th century, there lived at Baghdad an aged merchant who had grown wealthy in his business, and who had an only son to whom he was tenderly attached. He resolved to marry him to the daughter of another merchant, a girl of considerable fortune, but without any personal attractions. Abu Hassan, the merchant's son, on being shown the portrait of the lady, requested his father to delay the marriage till he could reconcile his mind to it. Instead, however, of doing this, he fell in love with another girl, the daughter of a sage, and he gave his father no peace till he consented to the marriage with the object of his affections. The old man stood out as long as he could, but finding that his son was bent on acquiring the hand of the fair Nadila, and was equally resolute not to accept the rich and ugly lady, he did what most fathers under such circumstances are constrained to do. He acquiesced. The wedding took place with great pomp and ceremony, and a happy honeymoon ensued, which might have been happier but for one little circumstance, which led to very serious consequences. Abdul Hassan noticed that his bride quitted the nuptial couch as soon as she thought her husband was asleep, and did not return to it till did not return to it till before dawn. Okay, there's a weird way this sentence is written. Sorry. Filled with curiosity, Hassan one night feigned sleep, and saw his wife rise and leave the room as usual. He followed cautiously and saw her enter a cemetery. By the straggling moonbeams, he beheld her go into a tomb. He stepped in after her. I'm sorry about my dog, you guys. The scene within was horrible. A party of ghouls were assembled with the spoils of the graves that they had violated, and were feasting on the flesh of the long-buried corpses. His own wife, who, by the way, never touched supper at home, played no inconsiderable part in the hideous banquet. As soon as he could safely escape, Abdul Hassan stole back to his bed. He said nothing to his bride till next evening, when supper was laid, and she declined to eat. Then he insisted on her partaking, and when she positively refused, he exclaimed wrathfully, "Yes, you keep your appetite for your feast with the ghouls." Nadila was silent. She turned pale and trembled, and without a word sought her bed. At midnight she rose, fell on her husband with her nails and teeth, tore open his throat, and having opened a vein, attempted to suck his blood. But Abu Hassan, springing to his feet, threw her down, and with a blow unalived her. She was buried the next day. 3 days after, at midnight, she reappeared, attacked her husband again, and again attempted to suck his blood. He fled from her, and on the morrow opened her tomb, burned her to ashes, and cast them into the Tigris. This story connects the ghoul with the vampire. As will be seen by a former chapter, the werewolf and the vampire are closely related. That the ancients held the same belief that the witches violate corpses is evident from the third episode in the Golden Ass of Apuleius. See, I have problems with these words. I'm sorry. The Golden Ass of Apuleius. I will only quote the words of the crier. Quote, "I pray thee, tell me," replied I, "of what kind are the duties attached to this funeral guardianship?" "Duties," quoth the crier. "Why, keep wide awake all night, with thine eyes fixed steadily upon the corpse, neither winking nor blinking, nor looking to the right nor looking to the left, either to one side or the other. Be it even little, for the witches, infamous wretches that they are, can slip out of their skins in an instant, and change themselves into the form of any animal they have in mind. And then they crawl along so slyly, that the eyes of justice, nay, the eyes of the sun himself, are not keen enough to perceive them. At all events, their wicked devices are infinite in number and variety, and whether it be in the shape of a bird, or a dog, or a mouse, or even of a common housefly, that they exercise their dire incantations. If thou art not vigilant in the extreme, they will deceive thee one way or the other, and overwhelm thee with sleep. Nevertheless, as regards the reward, 'twill be from 4 to 6 ariel, nor, although 'tis a perilous service, wilt thou receive more. Nay, hold, I had almost forgotten to give thee a necessary caution. Clearly understand that it, the corpse, be not restored to the relatives entire. The deficient pieces of the flesh torn off by the teeth of the witches must be replaced from the face of the sleepy guardian. Here we have the rending of corpses connected with the change of form. Mark Cassis relates that after a long war in Syria, during the night, troops of Lamias, female evil spirits, appeared upon the field of battle, unearthing the hastily buried bodies of the soldiers, and devouring the flesh off their bones. They were pursued and fired upon, and some young men succeeded in killing a considerable number. But during the day, they had all of them in the forms of wolves or hyenas. That there is a foundation of truth in these horrible stories, and that it is quite possible for a human being to be possessed of a depraved appetite for rending corpses, is proved by an extraordinary case brought before a court-martial in Paris, so late as July 10th, 1849. The details are given with fullness, and the annals medico-psychoglyphs, I can say that, for that month and year. Okay? They are too revolting for reproduction. I will, however, give an outline of this remarkable case. That must have been something bad, because this guy's pretty open about his stuff. In the autumn of 1848, several of the cemeteries in the neighborhood of Paris were found to have been entered during the night, and graves to have been rifled. The deeds were not those of medical students, for the bodies had not been carried off, but were found lying about the tombs in fragments. It was at first supposed that the perpetration of these outrages must have been a wild beast, but footprints in the soft earth left no doubt that it was a man. Close watch was kept at Père Lachaise, but after a few corpses had been mangled there, the outrages ceased. In the winter, another cemetery was ravaged, and it was not till March in 1849 that a spring gun, which had been set in the cemetery of Esparnasse, went off during the night and warned the guardians of the place that the mysterious visitor had fallen into the trap. They rushed to the spot, only to see a dark figure in a military mantle leap the wall and disappear into the gloom. Marks of blood, however, gave evidence that he had been hit by the gun when it had discharged. At the same time, a fragment of blue cloth, torn from the mantle, was obtained and afforded a clue towards the identification of the ravisher of the tombs. On the following day, the police went from barrack to barrack, inquiring whether officer or man were suffering from a gunshot wound. By this means, they discovered the person. He was a junior officer in the 1st Infantry Regiment of the name of Bertrand. He was taken to the hospital to be cured of his wound, and on his recovery, he was tried by court-martial. His history was this. He had been educated in the theological seminary of Langres, till, at the age of 20, he entered the army. He was a young man of retiring habits, frank and cheerful to his comrades, so as to be greatly beloved by them, of feminine delicacy and refinement, and subject to fits of depression and melancholy. In February 1847, as he was walking with a friend in the country, he came to a churchyard, the gate of which stood open. The day before, a woman had been buried, but the sexton had not completed filling in the grave, and he had been engaged upon it on the present occasion, when a storm of rain had driven him to shelter. Bertrand noticed the spade and pick lying beside the grave, and, to use his own words, "Acete vu des ideas de noris me venerit de common." Okay, sorry about that. Again, I can't speak French. Probably George is having a good laugh about this. He managed by some excuse to get rid of his companion, and then returning to the churchyard, he caught up a spade and began to dig into the grave. Soon I dragged the corpse out of the earth, and I began to hash it with the spade, without well knowing what I was about. A laborer saw me, and I laid myself flat on the ground till he was out of sight, and then I cast the body back into the grave. I then went away, bathed in a cold sweat, to a little grove where I reposed for several hours, notwithstanding the cold rain which fell in a condition of complete exhaustion. When I arose, my limbs were as if broken, and my head weak. The same prostration and sensation followed after each attack. 2 days after, I returned to the cemetery and opened the grave with my hands. My hands bled, but I did not feel the pain. I tore the corpse to shreds and flung it back into the pit. He had no further attack for 4 months, till his regiment came to Paris. As he was one day walking in the gloomy, shadowy alleys of Paris-Lachaise, the same feeling came over him like a flood. In the night, he climbed the wall and dug up a little girl of 7 years old. All right? He did his business. He opened the grave of a woman who had died in childbirth and had lain in the grave for 13 days. On the 16th November, he dug up an old woman of 50 and, ripping her to pieces, rolled among the fragments. He did the same to another corpse. Now remember, don't turn me into Facebook police, you guys, because I'm just reading these accounts, okay? But please don't turn me into Facebook police. YouTube police either. He did the same to another corpse on the 12th of December. These are only a few of the numerous cases of violation of tombs to which he owned. It was on the night of the 15th March that the spring gun shot him. Bertrand declared at his trial that whilst he was in the hospital, he had not felt any desire to renew his attempts, and that he considered himself cured of his horrible propensities, where he had seen men dying in the beds around him, and now, Jesus, oscuro your car. Okay, again. The fits of exhaustion which followed his accesses are very remarkable, as he precisely resembled those which followed the, the berserker rages of the Northmen, and the expeditions of the werewolves. The case of Van Bertrand is indubitably most singular and anomalous. It scarcely bears the character of insanity, but seems to point rather to a species of diabolical possession. At first, the accesses chiefly followed upon his drinking wine, but after a while they came back upon him without exciting cause. The manner in which he mutilated the dead was different. Some he chopped with a spade, others he tore and ripped with his teeth and nails. Sometimes he tore the mouth open and rent the face back to the ears. He opened the stomachs and pulled out the limbs. Although he dug up the bodies of several men, he felt no inclination to mutilate them, whereas he delighted in rending female corpses. He was sentenced to a year's imprisonment. Okay, Chapter XVI, A Sermon on Werewolves. The following curious specimen of a late medieval sermon is taken from the Old German edition of the Discourses of Dr. Johann Geiler von Kaiserberg, a famous preacher in Strasbourg. The volume is entitled Die, M-E-I-S. Okay, I'm not reading it in German, guys, I'm sorry. Sometimes they'll put, like the translation, but it's not there. This strange series of sermons was preached at Strasbourg in the year 1508 and was taken down and written out by a barefooted friar, Jonathan Polly, and by him published in 1517. The doctor died on Midlet Sunday, 1510. There is a Latin edition of his sermons, but whether of the same series or not I cannot tell, as I have been unable to obtain a sight of the volume. The German edition is illustrated with bold and clever woodcuts. Among others, there are representations of the witches, Sabbath, the wild huntsman, and a werewolf attack on a man. The sermon was preached on the third Sunday in Lent. No text is given, but there is a general reference to the gospel for the day. This is the discourse. Headed thus: Andrite Sontag Afasi, I have no idea what I'm saying, Akali, Penegret de Doctor, Vode Werewolfen. What shall we say about werewolves? For there are werewolves, which run about the villages, devouring men and children. As men say about them, they run about full gallop, injuring men, and are called werewolf, or werewolf. Do you ask men if I know aught about them? I answer, yes. They are apparently wolves which can eat men and children, and that happens on 7 accounts. So I've got 7 things here. It's going to be hunger, savageness, old age, experience, madness, the devil, and God. Okay. The first happens through hunger, when the wolves find nothing to eat in the woods. They must come to people and eat men when hunger drives them to it. You see well, when it's very cold, that the stags come in search of food up to the villages, and the birds actually into the dining room in search of victuals. Under the second head, wolves eat children through their innate savageness, because they are savage, and that is propter locum quaedam ferum. Their savageness arises first from their condition. Wolves which live in cold places are smaller on that account, and more savage than other wolves. Secondly, their savageness depends on the season. They are more savage about Candlemas than at any other. They are more savage at the time of Candlemas than any other time of the year, and the men must be more on their guard against them than at other times. It is a proverb: he who seeks a wolf at Candlemas, a peasant on Shrove Tuesday, and a person in Lent is a man of pluck. Thirdly, their savageness depends on their having young. When the wolves have young, they are more savage than when they have not. You see it so in all the beasts. A wild duck, when it has young colts? You see what an uproar it makes. A cat fights for its young kittens. The wolves do ditto. Under the third head, the wolves do injury on account of their age. When a wolf is old, it is weak and feeble in its days, so it can't run fast enough to catch stags, and therefore it runs a man whom it can catch easier than a wild animal. It also unalives children and men easier than wild animals, because of its teeth. For its teeth break off when it is very old. You see it well in old women, how the last teeth wobble, and they have scarcely a tooth left in their heads, and they open their mouths for men to feed them with mash and stewed substances. Under the fourth head, the injury the werewolves do arises from experience. It is said that human flesh is far sweeter than other flesh. So when a wolf has once tasted human, he desires to taste it again. So he acts like old toppers, who, when they know the best wine, will not be put off with inferior quality. Under the fifth head, the injury arises from ignorance. A dog, when it is mad, is also inconsiderate, and it bites any man. It does not recognize its own lord. And what is a wolf but a wild dog, which is mad and inconsiderate, so that it regards no man? Under the sixth head, the injury comes of the devil, who transforms himself and takes on him in the form of a wolf. So writes Vincentius in his Speculum History. And he has taken it from Valerius Maximus in the Punic War. When the Romans fought against the men of Africa, when the captain lay asleep, there came a wolf and drew his sword and carried it off. That was the devil in a wolf's form. The like writes William of Paris that a wolf will kill and devour children and do the greatest mischief. There was a man who had the fantasy that he himself was a wolf, and afterwards he was found lying in the wood, and he was dead out of sheer hunger. Under the seventh head, the injury comes of God's ordinance. For God will sometimes punish certain lands and villages with wolves. So we read of Elisha, that when Elisha wanted to go up a mountain out of Jericho, some naughty boys made a mock of him and said, "Oh, bald head, step up. Oh, glossy pate, step up." What happened? He cursed them. Then came two bears out of the desert and tore about 42 of the children. That was God's ordinance. Remember, this is back in the 1800s. Doesn't apply to today, guys, so just chill. The like we read of prophet who had set at naught the commands he had received of God, for he was persuaded to eat bread at the house of another. As he went home, he rode upon his mule. Then came a lion which slew him and left the mule alone. That was God's ordinance. Therefore, must man turn to God when he brings wild beasts to do him mischief? Which some brutes he may not bring now, and or evermore. Amen. It will be seen from this extraordinary sermon that Dr. Johann Geiler von Kesselsberg did not regard werewolves in any other light than natural wolves, filled with a lust for human flesh. And he puts aside altogether the view that they are men in a state of metamorphosis. However, he alludes to this superstition in his sermon on wild men of the woods, but translated with werewolves to Spain. The end. Okay, that is it. Wow, that was quick. Updated editions will replace the previous one. So that would be the end of the werewolf book. So fascinating book. Now, if you'd like, I can either look for something, or we can have a half-hour discussion about the paranormal. Maybe we'll do that to finish off this, so we can start bright on Sunday. When I was growing up, let me turn this off. It was just an early chat for a half hour. That was the end of the werewolf book. That was a great book, and I highly recommend it. It's called The Book of Werewolves, and you guys can. There's a link to it down in the description of the show. Okay. That being said, and we're just here at another quick 30 minutes. I heard of werewolves, and just like here, there's a sect of vampires in Sacramento that like to hang out. But I mean, it's just legendary, right? Or are they? Is it legendary or not? As a paranormal investigator, we really look at everything, and possibilities of everything. Have I gone on cases where I thought there was a werewolf? No. Am I happy that I didn't that I didn't have any cases? Yes. Because the truth, the truth be said, I mean, I don't know how I would handle that stuff. And be able to live in an area like some of the people I've had on my show that talk about different cryptids and dogmen and things like that. I don't know how I would react to that at all. See, I didn't know how far we had to go to the end of that book. I didn't think it was going to be that quick. But it's an interesting read. And again, like I said, I found the book purely by accident, watching Little House on the Prairie. And the kids were reading that in school, and I didn't know if it was a prop or if it was a real book. So I started Googling Project Gutenberg, and boom, it came up. So it's very interesting. Again, Project Gutenberg has thousands of books. I'm not being paid to say this. I'm just saying I discovered them, and for the last 6 months, I've been reading out of these books for the show, because I like to read paranormal themed books, right? So, yeah, I mean, they've got tons of paranormal books and stuff. But when you think about these things like werewolves and this stuff, you hear this stuff when you're a kid, these stories, you see movies, you see all that stuff. It's incredible. It's incredible. The campfire stories to scare you, right? It's pretty much campfire stories. So, yeah, I thought the book was very enjoyable. I give it, if you have 5 out of 5 stars. 5 out of 5 stars. Hang on 1 second. Let me see if I can find another book, okay? Let's start with the book. Even if I read the preface to it. Let me get this thing powered up. I think as a paranormal investigator, like I said, we have to look at all facets of the investigation, because you never know what it's going to be. I mean, the whole thing with fairy folk never really struck me until I did 2 or 3 investigations where we actually saw them and heard them. Actually heard the fairy folk. And then I started to think a little more of it, and think, okay, well, maybe there is something to it. Just like werewolves, who knows, right? We don't know. Nobody knows. Let me get this on. Let's see if we can find a book, okay? I'll take you through Project Gutenberg. So I want to make sure that you guys, that we get a new book. So let's see what we can do here. We'll look for something paranormal. So we can go in there and let me go look for it. Give me a second. Okay. It's just that easy to go to Project Gutenberg. Sorry, I didn't think it was going to be, there it is, that quick to end it. So let me pull it up. Let's see what we can do with Project Gutenberg. Would you guys like to hear something about vampires? Maybe we should do vampires? Let's see if I can find something about vampires. Let's see. Let me do a search. Who's got the button? Search. Okay, let's do something about vampires. Or maybe we could read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. That's available too on here. Let me go look now. It's probably going to be spelled oldie too. Let me see. Well, we'll start a new book today. How's that? Go. What do we got? Well, there's Dracula. We could do that one. Oh, the Vampire Tale. All kinds of stuff in here. Boy, that one's been downloaded a lot. I wonder what this is. That one. Some of true stories. No, not true stories. The vampires from French. Not happening. Oh, there's a Hungarian one. I'd be interested to see that one. Let's see. Let me take a look really quick here. Yeah, there's all kinds of them. Alright, spiritual vampire. How about we read Bram Stoker's Dracula? How's that sound? Okay, we'll do Bram Stoker's Dracula. Alright, let's go for it. Let's read Dracula. Let me find the text so I can download it. Oh, read online. We don't want to do that, so we want to download for Kindle. Let's see if I can get it into my Kindle. Let's see if I get it in there. You never know. Let's see if I can get it in the Kindle. Okay, because we want to pull it up in... Maybe I have to go directly from my book file. Hang on. I haven't done this in a while. Yeah, let's read Bram Stoker's Dracula. How's that sound? Give me a second. see if I can get in here and do a search. I should be able to get it. There shouldn't be a problem downloading it. Okay. Let's go ahead and see if I can't get the Project Gutenberg from here. Oh, the pocketbook store. Well, okay. Okay, why don't we do that? Bram Stoker, okay. Bram, we'll just do that this way. Stoker's Dracula. Give me a second, you guys. I didn't expect to have to do this soon. Bear with me. Okay, let's see if they have it. It's not coming up. Okay, let's see. Oh, let's see if it. Hang on a second. All files. Let's see what we got. Did it come? Good. We may not get it. I'm trying to get it right now. Let me go back into here. Okay, I'm going to try and... How about plain text? Would that work? Oh, here we are. Okay. Let me enlarge this so I can read it. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and read Bram Stoker. Oh, it's going to go up because I have plain text. I'll have to fix this later. Okay, I'm trying to get a Kindle version. Just bear with me. That's what I would prefer, is doing the Kindle version. Let's go with Kindle. Give me a second, you guys. Older Kindles, try that one. There you go. Downloaded file. Let's see, do you want to download images? Well, do it again. Download again. See if it comes up. If it doesn't, then I'm going to have to, yeah, we might quit it anyway on the show. Just give me a second. See if I can pull it up in my books. Books. There we go. Let's see if it's in here. Sometimes they come up, sometimes they don't. All books. See if it came up. Dracula. Sorry for the delay. Search. Yeah, for some reason I'm not getting it in here. That's not good. Either I don't have the right format, or we do a search in the store maybe. Give me a second. I apologize for the RSS feed too. I'm just trying to do this. Weird. Okay. I usually can get these things downloaded pretty fast, but it looks like let's see. I'll try the EPUB. Okay, it just went, so let's see if I got it now. Let's see. See if I have it come up now. Files. I'm not seeing it here, so somewhere it's on here. Okay, anyway, we could talk excuse me. We could talk a little bit more. Yeah, I'm not seeing it. I'm seeing the Fenton Ripshaw. Yeah. Okay, it's not going to happen right now, so I'm going to have to wait. Sorry about that. But anyway, like I said, I didn't expect to end this early today. But anyway, I'd like to hear your stories. You guys can email me and stuff with your stories. Hello. Michelle, what's up? Alright. yeah, we're gonna go ahead and as soon as I can get, as soon as I'm off here, I'll download Bram Stoker's Dracula, and we'll read that one. But right now, I'm just not getting access to it to bring it on to the book. I think I have to move it into the system, and I forgot how to do it. It's been so long. But it's, these legends come up, and this book was so thorough with the legends, and that this guy, this Anglican priest, is so educated. It shocked me how educated he was in knowing medical terminology and mental state for stuff, and I just thought it was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. So yeah, so what I think I'm going to do is we're just going to get out of here early today, and I'll see you guys tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. Pacific with me and Nancy Matz. And yeah, I try to if I don't want to sit here all day taking up your time downloading stuff. So I'd rather just, bug out and see you guys tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific with me and Nancy Matz. That's what I would rather do at this point. And I know there's a way to get it into pocketbooks. I just don't know why it's not going there from Google. And I think Bram Stoker's Dracula will take a while to read. I think it'll be fun. I think it'll be a fun book to read. Just waiting for it to power up so I can do it one more time. But anyway, I just want to share this book with you today. And again, I'm on early because the presidential debates, because I know what's going to happen. That if I tried to do this from 6:30 to 7:30, nobody would watch. So I thought I'd just come in and do it this way. So okay, well, it should have downloaded to Pocketbooks, and I can't get it up, so I'll have to figure all that out. But we're going to be talking Jim Hawkins and Bram Stoker Dracula? I want to read now, so let's just figure this out. EPUB Kindle. It should just come up, but it's not. If I put it down the file. Like I said, I don't want to waste your time doing this, right? It's not fair to you either. I mean, you guys could be doing other things that make you happy, and besides listening to me sit here and fumble with this. See if I can find it in the store. But, again, it's been an interesting ride. What is that on the cloud? That looks familiar. Nope, that's Book of Werewolves. So where do it's an EPUB. So that is an EPUB. So I need to make it download an EPUB. That's what it is. The Book of Werewolves was an EPUB. So that tells me right there. To get back in there. But this is what I have to do. EPUB, e-readers, and send a Kindle as well. It's going. Details. Let's see if I can find it. This may be it here. Let's see. Let's see what it does. Did I get it? We got it. Okay, we're here. All right, let's start. Yeah, we're going to start. I'm sorry for the delay. I finally got it. See what we can do. Okay, let's go to Bram Stoker's Dracula. And let's start reading. And I will read till 5:35 because I told you guys I would do that. Okay, let me get this enlarged so I can actually read the thing. Okay, so chapter 1, Bram Stoker's Dracula. I'm sorry for the delay. I hope you guys stuck with me. All right. Jonathan Harker's journal. Left Munich at 8:35 p.m. on May 1st. Arriving at Vienna early next morning. Should have arrived at 6:46. The train was an hour late. Budapest, Hungary. Been there. Seems a wonderful place. From the glimpse which I got of it from the train, and the little I could walk around. I feared to go very far from the station, as we had arrived late and would start as near the correct time as possible. The impression I had was that we were leaving the west and entering the east. The most western of splendid bridges over the Danube, which is here of noble width and depth, took us among the traditions of Turkish rule. We left in pretty good time, and came after nightfall to Klausenberg. Here I stopped for the night at the Hotel Royal. I had for dinner, or rather supper, a chicken done up some way with red pepper, which was very good but thirsty. Memo, get recipe for Mina. I asked the waiter, and he said it was called paprika hendel, and that, as it was a national dish, I should be able to get it anywhere along the Carpathians. I found my smattering of German very useful. I don't know how I should be able to get on without it. Having some time at my disposal in London, I visited the British Museum and made search among the books and maps in the library regarding Transylvania. It had struck me that some foreknowledge of the country could hardly fail to have some importance in dealing with the noblemen of that country. I find that the district he named is in the extreme east of the country, just on the borders of 3 states, Transylvania, Moldavia, and Bukovina, in the midst of the Carpathian Mountains, one of the wildest and least known portions of Europe. I was not able to light on any map or work given the exact locality of the Castle Dracula, as there are no maps of this country as yet to compare with our own ordnance survey maps. But I found that Beatsfritz, the post town named by Count Dracula, is a fairly well-known place. I shall enter here some of my notes, as they may refresh my memory when I talk over my travels with Nina. In the population of Transylvania, there are 4 distinct nationalities: Saxons in the south, and mixed with them the Wallachs, who are descendants of the Dacians, Magyars in the west, Hungarians, and Sexleys in the east and north. I am going among the latter, who claim to be descended from Attila the Hun. This may be so, for when the Magyars conquered the country in the 11th century, they found the Huns settled in it. I read that every known superstition in the world is gathered into the horseshoe of the Carpathians, as if it were the center of some sort of imaginative whirlpool. If so many may be very interesting, no, I must ask the Count all about them. I did not sleep well, though my bed was comfortable enough, for I had all sorts of queer dreams. There was a dog howling all night under my window, which may have had something to do with it, or it may have been the paprika, for I had to drink up all the water in my carafe, and was still thirsty. Towards morning, I slept and was wakened by the continuous knocking at my door, so I guess I must have been sleeping soundly then. I had for breakfast more paprika, and a sort of porridge of maize flour, which they said was mamaliga, an eggplant stuffed with forcemeat, a very excellent dish, which they call impletata, memory, get the recipe. I had to hurry breakfast, for the train started a little before 8, or rather it ought to have done so, for after rushing to the station at 7:30, I had to sit in the carriage for more than an hour before we began to move. It seems to me that the further east you go, the more unpunctual are the trains. What ought they to be in China? All day long, we seemed to dawdle through a country which was full of beauty of every kind. Sometimes we saw little towns or castles on the top of the steep hills, such as we see in old missals. Sometimes we ran by rivers and streams which seemed from the wide stony margin on each side of them to be subject to great floods. It takes a lot of water and running strong to sweep the outside edge of a river clear. At every station, there were groups of people, sometimes crowds, and in all sorts of attire. Some of them were just like the peasants at home, or those I saw coming through France and Germany, with short jackets and round hats and homemade trousers. But others were very picturesque. The women looked pretty, except when you got near them, but they were very clumsy about the waist. They had all full white sleeves of some kind or other, and most of them had big belts with a lot of strips of something fluttering from them, like the dresses in a ballet. But of course, there were petticoats under them. The strangest figures we saw were the Slovaks, who were more barbarian than the rest, with their big cowboy hats, great baggy dirty white trousers, white linen shirts, and enormous heavy leather belts, nearly a foot wide, all studded over with brass nails. They wore high boots with their trousers tucked into them, and had long black hair and heavy black mustaches. They are very picturesque, but do not look like prepossessing. On the stage, they would be set down at once as some old, the guy has Oriental, Asian band of brigands. They are, however, I am told, very harmless and rather wanting in natural self-assertion. It was on the dark side of twilight when we got to Bistritz, which is a very interesting old place, being practically on the frontier, for the Borgo Pass leads from it into Buchlonia. It has had a very stormy existence, and it certainly shows marks on it. 50 years ago, a series of great fires took place, which made terrible havoc on 5 separate occasions. At the very beginning of the 17th century, it underwent a siege of 3 weeks and lost 13,000 people, the casualties of war proper being assisted by famine and disease. Count Dracula had directed me to go to the Golden Krone Hotel, which I found, to my great delight, to be thoroughly old-fashioned, for of course I wanted to see all I could of the ways of the country. I was evidently expected, for when I got near the door I faced a cheery-looking elderly woman in the usual peasant dress, white undergarment, with long double apron, front and back, of colored stuff, fitting almost too tight for modesty. When I came close she bowed and said to an Englishman, "Yes," I said, "Jonathan Harker." She smiled and gave some message to an elderly man in white shirt-sleeves, who had followed her to the door. He went, but immediately returned with a letter. "My friend, welcome to the Carpathians. I am anxiously expecting you. Sleep well tonight. At 3 tomorrow, the diligence will start for Bukovina. A place on it is kept for you. At the Borgo Pass, my carriage will await you, and will bring you to me. I trust that your journey from London has been a happy one, and that you will enjoy your stay in my beautiful land. Your friend, Dracula." 4 May. I found that my landlord had got a letter from the Count, directing him to secure the best place on the coach for me, but on making inquiries as to the details, he seemed somewhat reticent, and pretended that he could not understand my German. This could not be true, because up to then he had understood it perfectly. At least, he answered my questions exactly as if he did. He and his wife, the old lady who had received me, looked at each other in a frightened sort of way. He mumbled out that the money had been sent in a letter, and that was all he knew. When I asked him if he knew Count Dracula and could tell me anything of his castle, both he and his wife crossed themselves, and, saying that they knew nothing at all, simply refused to speak further. It was so near the time of starting that I had no time to ask anyone else, for it was all very mysterious, and not by any means comforting. Just before I was leaving, the old lady came up to my room and said in a very hysterical way, "Must you go? Oh, young Henry, young heir, must you go?" She was in such an excited state that she seemed to have lost her grip of what German she knew, and mixed it all up with some other language, which I did not know at all. I was just able to follow her by asking many questions. When I told her that I must go at once, and that I was engaged on important business, she asked again, "Do you know what day it is?" I answered that it was the 4th of May. She shook her head as she said again, "Oh yes, I know that. But do you know what day it is?" On my saying that I did not understand, she went on, "It is the eve of St. George's Day. Do you not know that tonight, when the clock strikes midnight, all the evil things in the world will have full sway? Do you know where you are going, and what you're going to do?" She was in such an evident distress that I tried to comfort her, but without effect. Finally, she went down on her knees and implored me not to go. At least wait a day or two before starting. It was all very ridiculous, but I did not feel comfortable. However, there was business to be done, and I could allow nothing to interfere with it. I therefore tried to raise her up, and said, as gravely as I could, that I thanked her, but my duty was imperative, and that I must go. She then rose and dried her eyes, and taking a crucifix from her neck, offered it to me. I did not know what to do, for as an English churchman, I have been taught to regard such things as in some measure idolization, and yet it seemed so ungracious to refuse an old lady meaning so well, and in such a state of mind. She saw, I suppose, the doubt in my face, for she put the rosary round my neck and said, "For your mother's sake," and went out of the room. I'm writing up this part of the diary whilst I am waiting for the coach, which is, of course, late, and the crucifix is still round my neck. Whether it is the old lady's fear, or the many ghostly traditions of this place, or the crucifix itself, I do not know, but I am not feeling nearly as easy in my mind as usual. If this book should ever reach Mina before I do, let it bring my goodbye. Here comes the coach. 5 May, the castle. The, excuse me. The gray of the morning had passed, and the sun is high over the distant horizon, which seemed jagged. Whether the trees or hills, I know not. For it's so far off that big things and little are mixed. I'm not sleepy, and as I am not to be called till I awake, naturally, I write till sleep comes. There are many odd things to put down, and, lest who reads them may fancy that I dined too well before I left Feaster's. Let me put down my dinner exactly. I dined on what they called robber steak, bits of bacon, onion, and beef, seasoned with red pepper, and strung on sticks and roasted over the fire, in the simple style of the London cat's meat. The wine was golden medius, I don't know what that is, which produces a queer sting on the tongue, which is, however, not disagreeable. I had only a couple of glasses of this, and nothing else. When I got on the couch, the driver had not taken a seat, and I saw him talking with the landlady. They were evidently talking about me, for every now and then they looked at me, and some of the people who were sitting on the bench outside the door, which they called by a name meaning word bearer, came and listened, and then looked at me, most of them pityingly. I could not hear a lot of the words, often repeated, queer words. For there, I'm sorry, I could hear a lot, I could hear a lot of the words often repeated, queer words. For there were many nationalities in the crowd. So I quietly got my polyglot dictionary from my bag and looked them out. I must say, they were not cheering to me. For amongst them were the Ordog, Satan, Michael Hell, Witch, Warlock, and Vikestalk, both of which means the same thing, one being Slovak and the other being Serbian, for something that is either werewolf or vampire. No, memory. I must ask the Count about these superstitions. When we started, the crowd round the inn door, which had by this time swelled to a considerable size, all made the sign of the cross and pointed 2 fingers towards me. With some difficulty, I got a fellow passenger to tell me what they meant. He would not answer at first, but on learning that I was English, he explained that it was a charm or a guard against the evil eye. This was not very pleasant for me, just starting from an unknown place to meet an unknown man. But everyone seemed so kind-hearted and so sorrowful, and so sympathetic that I could not but be touched. I shall never forget the last glimpse which I had of the inn-yard, and its crowd of picturesque figures, all crossing themselves, as they stood round the wide archway, with its background of rich foliage of oleander, and orange trees and green tubs clustered in the center of the yard. Then our driver, whose wide linen drawers covered the whole front of the box seat, Gatsa, they call them, cracked his big whip over his 4 small horses, which ran abreast and were set off on our journey. I soon lost sight and recollection of ghostly fears and the beauty of the scene as we drove along, although, had I known the language, or rather languages, which my fellow passengers were speaking, I might not have been able to throw them off so easily. Before us lay green sloping land full of forests and woods, with here and there steep hills crowned with clumps of trees or with farmhouses. The blank gable end to the road was everywhere a bewildering mass of fruit blossom, apple, plum, pear, cherry, and as we drove by, I could see the green grass under the trees spangled with fallen petals. In and out amongst these green hills of what they call here the middle land ran the road, losing itself as it swept around the grassy curve, or was shut out by the straggling ends of pine woods, which here and there ran down the hillsides like tongues of flame. The road was rugged, but we seemed to fly over it with a feverish haste. I could not understand then what the haste meant, but the driver was evidently bent on losing no time in reaching Baring-Gould. I was told that this road is in the summertime excellent, but that it had not yet been put in order after the winter snows. In this respect, It is different from the general run of roads in the Carpathians, for it is an old tradition that they are not to be kept in too good order. Of old, the Hafsadars would not repair them, lest the Turk should think that they were preparing to bring in foreign troops, and so hasten, and so hasten, and so hasten the war, which was always really a loading point. Beyond the green swelling hills of the middle land rose mighty slopes of the forest, up to the lofty steeps of the Carpathians themselves. Right and left of us they towered, with the afternoon sun falling full upon them and bringing out all the glorious colors of this beautiful range. Deep blue and purple in the shadows of the parks and of the peaks, green and brown where grass and rock mingled, and an endless perspective of jagged rock and pointed crags, till these were themselves lost in the distance, where the snowy peaks rose grandly. Here and there seemed mighty rifts in the mountains, through which, as the sun began to sink, we saw now and again the white gleam of falling water. One of my companions touched my arm as we swept around the base of the hill and opened up the lofty snow-covered peak of the mountain, which seemed, as we wound on our serpentine way, to be right before us. Look! I stood still. God sees. And he crossed himself reverently. As we wound on our endless way, and the sun sank lower and lower behind us, the shadows of the evening began to creep round us. This was emphasized by the fact that the snowy mountain tops still held the sunset, and it seemed to glow out with a delicate cool pink. Here and there we passed Czechs and Slovaks, all in picturesque attire, but I noticed that goiter was painfully prevalent. By the roadside were many crosses, and as we swept by, my companions all crossed themselves. Here and there was a peasant man or woman kneeling before a shrine, who did not even turn round as we approached, but seemed, in self-surrender of devotion, to have neither eyes nor ears for the other round. There were many things new to me. For instance, hayricks in the trees, and here and there were beautiful masses of weeping birch, their white stems shining like silver through the delicate green of leaves. Now and again, we passed a leader wagon, the ordinary peasant's cart, with its long snake-like vertebrae calculated to suit the inequalities of the road. On this were sure to be seated quite a group of homecoming peasants, the Czechs with their white and the Slovaks with their colored sheepskins, the latter carrying lance fashion their long staves, with axe at the end. As the evening fell, it began to get very cold, and the growing twilight seemed to merge into one dark mistiness, the gloom of the trees, oak, beech, and pine, though in the valleys, which ran deep between the spurs of the hills, as we ascended through the pass, the dark firs stood out here and there against the background of late-lying snow. Sometimes, as the road was cut through the pine woods, that seemed, in the darkness, to be closing down upon us. Great masses of grayness, which here and there bestrewed the trees, produced a peculiarly weird and solemn effect, which carried on the thoughts and grim fancies engendered earlier in the evening, when the falling sunset threw into strange relief the ghost-like clouds, which amongst the Carpathians seemed to wind ceaselessly through the valleys. Sometimes the hills were so steep that, despite our driver's haste, the horses could only go slowly. I wished to get down and walk up to them, as we did at home, but the driver would not hear of it. No, no, he said, you must not walk here. The dogs are too fierce. And then he added, with what he evidently meant for grim pleasure, for he looked round to catch the approving smile of the rest, and you may have enough of such matters before you go to sleep. The only stop he would make was a moment's pause to light his lamps. When it grew dark, there seemed to be some excitement amongst the passengers, and they kept speaking to him, one after the other, as though urging him to further speed. He lashed the horses unmercifully with his long whip, and with wild cries of encouragement, urged them on to further exertions. Then, through the darkness, I could see a sordid patch of grey light ahead of us, as though there were a cleft in the hills. The excitement of the passengers grew greater. The crazy coach rocked on its great leather springs, and swayed like a boat tossed on a stormy sea. I had to hold on. The road grew more level, and we appeared to fly along. Then the mountain seemed to come nearer to us on each side, and to frown down upon us. We were entering the Borgo Pass. One by one, several of the passengers offered me gifts, which they pressed upon me with an earnestness which would take no denial. These were certainly of an odd and varied kind, but each was given in simple good faith, with a kindly word and a blessing, and that strange mixture of fear-meaning movements which I had seen outside the hotel at Fitzgerald's. The sign of the cross and the guard against the evil eye. Then, as we flew along, the driver leaned forward, and on each side of the passengers, craning over the edge of the coach, peered eagerly into the darkness. It was evident that something very exciting was either happening or expected. But though I asked each passenger, no one would give me the slightest explanation. This state of excitement kept on for some little time, and at last we saw before us the pass opening out on the eastern side. There were dark, rolling clouds overhead, and in the air the heavy, oppressive sense of thunder. It seemed as though the mountain range had separated two atmospheres, and that now we had gone into the thunderous one. I was now myself looking out for the conveyance for which was to take me to account. Each moment I expected to see the glare of lamps through the blackness, but all was dark. The only light was from flickering rays of our own lamps, in which the steam from our hard-driven horses rose in a white cloud. We could see now the sandy road lying white before us, but there was on it no sign of a vehicle. The passengers drew back with a sigh of gladness, which seemed to mock my own disappointment. I was already thinking what I had best to do, when the driver, looking at his watch, said to the others something which I could hardly hear. It was spoken so quietly, and so low a tone, I thought it was an hour less to the time. Then, turning to me, he said in German, worse than my own, there is no carriage here. The air is not expected after all. He will now come on to Bukovina and return tomorrow, or the next day. Better the next day. Whilst he was speaking, the horses began to neigh and snort and plunge wildly, so that the driver had to hold them up. Then, amongst a chorus of screams from the peasants and universal crossing of themselves, a caleche with 4 horses drove up behind us, overtook us, and drew up beside the coach. I could see from the flash of our lamps, as the rays fell on them, that the horses were coal-black and splendid animals. They were driven by a tall man with a long brown beard and a great black hat, which seemed to hide his face from us. I could only see the gleam of a pair of very bright eyes, which seemed red in the lamplight. As he turned to us, he said to the driver, "You are early tonight, my friend," the man stammered in reply. "The English Herr is here. Hurry." To which the stranger replied, "That is why, I suppose, you wished him to go on to Bukovina. You cannot deceive me, my friend. I know too much, and my horses are swift." As he spoke, he smiled, and the lamplight fell on a hard-looking mouth with very red lips and sharp-looking teeth, as white as ivory. One of my companions whispered to another the line from Burger's Lenore. I can't even pronounce it. We're not going to go there. I'm sorry. Okay? Here it is. For the dead travel fast. Okay? The strange driver evidently heard the words, for he looked up with a gleaming smile. The passenger turned his face away, at the same time putting out his 2 fingers, and crossed himself. "Give me the Herr's luggage," said the driver, and with exceeding alacrity, my bags were handed out and put in the caleche. Then I descended from the side of the coach. As the caleche was close alongside, the driver helping me with a hand which caught my arm in a grip of steel. His strength must have been prodigious. Without a word, he shook his reins, the horses turned, and we swept into the darkness of the pass. As I looked back, I saw the steam from the horses of the coach by the light of the lamps, and projected against it the figures of my late companions crossing themselves. Then the driver cracked his whip and called to his horses, and off they swept off their way to Bukovina. As they sank into the darkness, I felt a strange chill, and a lonely feeling came over me. But a cloak was thrown over my shoulders, and a rug across my knees, and the driver said in excitement, in excellent German, "The night is chill, mein Herr, and my master, the Count, bade me to take all care of you. There was there was a flask of the plum brandy underneath the seat, if you should require it. I did not take any, but it was a comfort to know it was there. All the same, I felt a little strangely, and not a little frightened. I think, had there been any alternative, I should have taken it, instead of prosecuting that unknown night journey. The carriage went at a hard pace straight along. Then we made a complete turn and went along another straight road. It seemed to me that we were simply going over and over the same ground again, and so I took note of some salient points, and found that this was so. I would have liked to have asked the driver what this was all about, but I really feared to do so, for I thought that, placed as I was, any protest would have no effect in case there had been intention to delay. By and by, however, as I was curious to know how the time was passing, I struck a match, and by its flame looked at my watch. It was within a few minutes of midnight. This gave me a sort of shock, for I suppose the general superstition about midnight was increased by my recent experiences. I waited with a sick feeling of suspense. Then a dog began to howl somewhere in a farmhouse far down the road. A long agonized wailing, as if from fear. The sound was taken up by another dog, and then another, and another, till, borne on the wind which now sighed softly through the pass, a wild howling began, which seemed to come from all over the country, as far as the imagination could grasp it, through the gloom of the night. At the first howl, the horses began to strain and rear, but the driver spoke to them soothingly, and they quieted down, but shivered and sweated as though after a runaway from sudden fright. Then, far off in the distance, from the mountain on each side of us began a louder and sharper howling, that of wolves, which affected both the horses and myself in the same way, for I was minded to jump from the caleche and run, whilst they reared again and plunged madly, so that the driver had to use all his great strength to keep them from bolting. In a few minutes, however, my own ears got accustomed to the sound, and the horses so far became quiet that the driver was able to descend to stand before them. He petted and soothed them, and whispered something in their ears, and I have heard of horse tamers doing this sort of thing with extraordinary effect, for under his caresses they became quite manageable again, though they still trembled. The driver again took his seat, and shaking his reins, started off at a great pace. This time, after going to the far side of the pass, he suddenly turned down a narrow roadway, which ran sharply to the right. Soon we were hemmed in with the trees, which in places arched right over the roadway till we passed as through a tunnel, and again great frowning rocks guarded us boldly on either side. Though we were in shelter, we could hear the rising wind, for it moaned and whistled through the rocks, and the branches of the trees crashed together as we swept along. It grew colder and colder still, and fine powdery snow began to fall, so that soon we and all around us were covered with a white blanket. The keen wind still carried the howling of the dogs, though this grew fainter as we went on our way. The baying of the wolves sounded nearer and nearer, as though they were closing round on us from every side. I grew dreadfully afraid, and the horses shared my fear. The driver, however, was not in the least bit disturbed. He kept turning his head to left and right, but I could not see anything through the darkness. Suddenly, away on our left, I saw a faint flickering blue flame. The driver saw it at the same moment. He at once checked the horses, and jumping to the ground, disappeared into the darkness. I did not know what to do. The less as the howling of wolves grew closer. But while I wondered, the driver suddenly appeared again, and without a word took his seat, and we resumed our journey. I think I must have fallen asleep, and I kept dreaming of the incident, for it seemed to be repeated endlessly, and now, looking back, it is like a sort of awful nightmare. Once the flame appeared so near the road that even in the darkness around us I could watch the driver's motions. He went rapidly to where the blue flame arose. It must have been very faint, for it did not seem to illuminate the place around us at all, and gathering a few stones, formed them into some device. Once there appeared a strange optical effect. When he stood between me and the flame, he did not obstruct it, for I could see its ghostly flicker all the same. This startled me, but as the effect was only momentary, I took it that my eyes deceived me, straining through the darkness. Then, for a time, there were no blue flames, and we sped onwards through the gloom, with the howling of the wolves around us, as though they were following in a moving circle. At last, there came a time when the driver went further afield than he had yet gone, and during his absence, the horses began to tremble even worse than ever, and to snort and scream with fright. I could not see anything or any cause for it, for the howling of the wolves had ceased altogether. But just then the moon, sailing through the black clouds, appeared behind the jagged crest of a beetling pine-clad rock, and by its light I saw around us a ring of wolves, with white teeth and lolling red tongues, with long sinewy limbs and shaggy hair. They were 100 times more terrible in the grim silence which held them than when they had howled. For myself, I felt a sort of paralysis of fear. It's only when a man feels himself face to face with such horrors that he can understand their true import. All at once, the wolves began to howl as though the moonlight had had some peculiar effect on them. The horses jumped about and reared and looked helplessly round, with eyes that rolled in a way painful to see. But the living ring of terror encompassed them on every side, and they had perforce to remain within it. I called to the coachman to come, for it seemed to me that our only chance was to try and break out through the ring and to aid his approach. I shouted and beat the side of the coach, hoping by the noise to scare the wolves from that side, so as to give him a chance of reaching the trap. How he came there, I know not, but I heard his voice raised in a tone of imperious command, and looking towards the sound, saw him stand in the roadway, as he swept his long arms as though brushing aside some impalpable obstacle. The wolves fell back and back further still. Just then a heavy cloud passed across the face of the moon, so that we were again in the darkness. When I could see again, the driver was climbing into the calash, and the wolves had disappeared. This was all so strange and uncanny that a dreadful fear came upon me, and I was afraid to speak or move. The time seemed interminable as we swept on our way, now in almost complete darkness, for the rolling clouds obscured the moon. We kept on ascending with occasional periods of quick descent, but in the main always ascending. Suddenly I became conscious of the fact that the driver was in the act of pulling up the horses in the courtyard of a vast ruined castle, from whose tall black windows came no ray or light, and whose broken battlements showed a jagged line against the moonlit sky. Okay, I'm stopping there. That's chapter 1. We will continue this on Sunday. This is a cool book. I never read Bram Stoker's Dracula, so I'll be reading it along with you guys and learning. I want to thank you all, everybody that stuck with me, trying to get this book downloaded and ready to go. I really appreciate it. I know I had about 10 lost minutes there. So, it's not always like that. I wasn't prepared to have to start a new book tonight, to be perfectly honest. So I want to thank you all for coming tonight, and I appreciate it. And I hope you have a great rest of your evening. I see Michelle was in the chat room. And I will see you tomorrow, 6:30 p.m. with me and Nancy Matz. It's Casual Friday. And the topic tomorrow is psychically picking up a lie. So I will see you guys tomorrow. And again, thank you all. And if you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. As always, we are equal opportunity here. All right, guys, I will see you tomorrow. Have a great rest of your evening. And remember to Okay. See you tomorrow. Bye.